Hello, I'm Dango Rose. Welcome to the Mountaineer Podcast, where everybody's listening. The Mountaineer brings you the latest news of the Peak to Peak region, in print, online, through our podcast, social media, and special publications. Now, listen in to the latest news of the area with our local journalists.
The song that you are currently listening to is called Jolie, and it is by the Denver band Dragondeer. It is the latest single from them. How recent is it? Well, it is out as of today, Friday, September 13th. It is now available to stream everywhere, along with previous releases from the band Dragondeer. You can see two members of Dragondeer, Halborg and Cole Rudy, open for Tom Hamilton Jr. as an acoustic duo at the Caribou Room, located at 55 Indian Peaks Drive in Nederland. More details coming up later in the podcast. To learn more about Dragondeer, visit them on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, or check out their website at dragondeer.com. Happy Friday the 13th, everybody. My name is Jamie Lammers. Hopefully your luck hasn't been too bad today, and hopefully it's gotten better now that this episode of the Mountaineer Podcast is out. Of course, this is our regular Friday edition of Music of the Mountains, Where to Be and What to See. I am very excited for this episode of the podcast because we're about to dive into two very storied musical careers here in Colorado, or at the very least from artists who are about to perform in Colorado, specifically in Nederland. I ended up finishing preliminary editing on both of these interviews much earlier than I initially anticipated. Just so you guys know why I still edit the podcast interviews the way that I do, I managed to cut down the first interview by half of its original length, and the second interview down to a third of its original length, while still keeping in all of the primary context. Don't ask me how I managed to do that, especially with the second interview. But I am very excited for this particular episode of the Mountaineer Podcast, partly because of these awesome musicians, and partly because this is the first time I've headlined the Caribou Room since they closed down a couple months ago for the summer. Alright, without further ado, here are this week's interviews. We're going to start with the interview from the opening act in the upcoming show that we're about to talk about, and then we're going to dive into the interview from the main act. I am very excited for both of these guests to come on board and join us. Our first guest, do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Sure, my name's Halborg. I play in the band Dragondeer. Also play in a project called Wabi, and we are playing the Caribou Room coming up. I'm forgetting the date, but it will be an acoustic gig with Cole Rudy of Dragondeer as well, and it's just a duo show opening for Tom Hamilton.
If I understand correctly, you are not performing with the entire lineup of Dragondeer for this show.
No, so they kind of wanted a stripped down performance of that, so I sing and play guitar and harmonica for Dragondeer, so it'll be a two-piece with me and then Cole Rudy, and he plays guitar and lap steel and mandolin, so it'll just be a more stripped down performance for that evening.
So Eric, before we dive into this particular show, I want to talk about Dragondeer as a whole. Can you tell us a bit about how the band began?
Sure. So I always get the date wrong, but it's been like 11 years now that we started. And interestingly, this will be going back to our roots for the Caribou room show because we started as a two-piece, and it was Cole and I, and we met through just, I guess, the indie music scene here in Denver. I was playing in sort of I don't know, it's like punk, a little bit of goth, a little bit of rock and roll band called the Swayback at the time, and Cole was playing in a metal band called Barnacle, and also in a kind of indie folk band called Varlet, and the two of us kind of knew each other through the music scene, hanging out at the High Dive mostly. There's a small indie club here in Denver, and we kind of got to talking and realized that we both had a love of old school blues. And I had been playing harmonica for a few years, but had never played with anyone. Just kind of done it in the car driving around Denver in traffic. And when he realized that I played harmonica, he said, well, why don't you play something over this? And I think we were hanging out somewhere, I'm forgetting, but he had a guitar. And like I said, I'd never played harmonica with anyone, and certainly not with another instrument. And we did that for the first time right then, and it went pretty well. And he was like, wow, you can play harmonica pretty well. And I was like, wow, I've never played with anyone before. And he's like, let's start a band. And so the initial impetus of it was just sort of to honor old school blues in whatever way two kids from Denver could muster. And yeah, that was the launch point. And the initial incarnation was me playing amplified classical guitar through a tube amp and playing harmonica, and I played tambourine with my foot, and then Cole played. At that point, it was mostly mandolin and lap steel through all sorts of effects. And then it went from there. Then we ended up getting a drummer, and then once the drum came, we kind of realized we needed a bassist. And I think for the first maybe year and a half, it was just the two of us. And we started getting gigs in the indie rock scene, because that was what we came from here in Denver, and playing like the UMS and High Dive and things like that. And then Kendall Smith, who was one of the time he was running the UMS in Denver, once we formed four of us and became more electrified, he realized that possibly the jam scene would dig what we do and introduced us to Scott Morrill over at Cervantes. And Scott has been completely amazing to us and instantly inject us into the jam scene, and I think he sort of fancied us in the Widespread Panic vein of things and kind of put us with, what was his name? Something Holt. I'm forgetting. We opened for him, and then we started opening for Jerry Joseph, write songs with Widespread Panic, and then he took a liking to us and had us play his personal festival in Oregon, Dixie Masters Festival, and then we went from there. Just started playing shows at Cervantes, and from that to Bluebird to getting picked up by Madison House, the booking management agency in Boulder, and then they had us playing Electric Forest and all over the country. And yeah, just been kind of cranking on it and writing songs and recording records since then.
By the way, I double-checked with Eric again after the interview to see if he remembered who the Holt he opened for was, and he did remember the name. Sam Holt was who they opened for. I wanted to just shout out the lineup of Dragondeer as a whole really quickly. Of course, there's Eric Halborg and Cole Rudy, but there is also drummer and percussionist Carl Sorensen and bassist Hunter Roberts. The bass role was previously filled by Casey Sidwell, but that role is currently filled by Roberts. But of course, as mentioned earlier, the entire lineup will not be performing at this particular show, just Eric and Cole for a stripped-down acoustic set. But Eric, I'm curious. You talked about playing the harmonica for a few years before you started Dragondeer. When did your interest start in pursuing music as a career? How far does your musical background go?
Well, I mean, I played in like a funk band, and I sang for a funk band in high school outside of Chicago. And the cats that I played with in that band, they had all won Illinois State Jazz all 4 years of high school. So they were flippers. And I didn't have that kind of prowess on an instrument, but I could sing. And we fell in love with, Stevie Wonder and the early James Brown, like the JBs, and at the time, Jamiroquai. And so, I sang with them. That didn't really leave the state of Illinois. And then I ended up moving to Boulder. And at the time, I was definitely into everything, from Fugazi and No Effects to Miles Davis and the Grateful Dead, right? And I think once I got to Boulder, I would be hanging out at these parties there and realized that when I would start DJing music, that the hippie folks that I was hanging out with were definitely not as open-minded to some of my harder inclinations of music, be it Sabbath or Mudhoney or, I don't know, Bad Religion or, I don't know, Dinosaur Jr., My Bloody Valentine. Anything on the heavier side that I was into, I was finding the cats that I had met in Boulder were like, Eric, this music's bumming us out. Can you put on another Fish bootleg or whatever? And I think I rebelled against that. I went to the extreme the other way and basically started a band called the Swayback that was heavily influenced by like the Dead Kennedys. Pretty fast, hard punk, and then it was mixed with maybe some Joy Division and Cure, darker, gothier sounds, but definitely punk rock. And I did that for 10 years. I played bass and sang for that. We toured all over the place. Played all over Colorado and recorded in Los Angeles. Did that whole thing. And then I think, the harmonica thing just kind of came, I've told the story a million times, but basically I got my car stereo stolen out of my pickup truck here in Denver at the rehearsal space that Swayback played in. And then I just never replaced the car stereo. I would just drive around and play harmonica just to sort of kill the time. And I don't know, usually high, so I wanted to be playing music when that happens. And yeah, so I played for like 3 years straight. Just kind of anytime I'd get in the car, I was playing harmonica quite a bit. Never with the radio, never with anyone, but definitely I think being a singer originally, it was sort of a way to exercise the diaphragm and just make music in a confined space. I could plug in anything, I could get up the strum anything, I could have the steering wheel on one hand and harp in the other, and just kind of got reps into it. And I think once Cole and I realized that I could play and he knew I could sing, I think the side that in the past loved funk and jam and that, I guess moving from Boulder and living to Denver, I sort of shook some of the prejudices that I'd been met with my eclectic music taste and went back towards an earthier, more root sound. And I think that was probably the impetus for the start of Dragondeer.
By the way, we'll be coming back to the Grateful Dead or the Dead soon enough. So who is primarily responsible for songwriting duties in Dragondeer?
I think it's kind of split between Cole and I. And then when we bring it to the band, a lot of times it's in a skeletal form. I might just have the basic chords and vocal melody and some lyrics. And we usually take it to the band in that state, and it twists and turns and morphs and kind of becomes a full band collaboration. But I would say that Cole and I usually bring them in that form initially.
Have you had a favorite part about the writing and arranging process over the years?
I'm once again with these cats that have jazz degrees, and I don't. I'm more of a self-taught fella. And so I'm often challenged and constantly learning from the other guys in the band, musically, chord structures. I'll often bring a pretty simple form of the song that often will get a bit more complicated once I bring it to them. Often if Cole brings in something, it could come in pretty complicated, and I might simplify it to be a little bit more digestible, I suppose. So I think it's a nice push-pull that way between us. I really like writing words. I type out all the lyrics, brainstorm on a typewriter, on like a 70s typewriter. And so being able to not only express things musically, but through words is definitely interesting to me and creatively satisfying. I don't know, all of it, because I like going into the studio too, and I like how that morphs, and I like finding people that we trust with our music to record with and bounce ideas off of that. I don't think anyone in the band has a very rigid ego, and I think that allows a lot of people's hands and energy to get into the music and come up with an end product, be something that's sort of beyond a single individual's vision. And I think that there's something interesting and magic about that.
And just out of curiosity, had you been writing before, or was Dragondeer the first band that allowed you to really expand your songwriting experience?
No, I wrote, in Swayback I was the main songwriter, and I was writing on bass, writing all the songs on bass and the words and the vocal melody. And I wrote the words for that band in high school and the vocal melodies. And then, I had an analog typewriter since high school. I was definitely like a Kerouac, Bukowski, Henry Miller, kind of the basics of deviant literature. At a young age, had read somewhere how Kerouac would, instead of taking individual sheets of paper when he would write, he would get these large rolls of paper. So he didn't have to stop, right? And he would type sort of free form without much intent, subject-wise, and because it was on a roll, he could just kind of go and go and go and sort of tap into a subconscious. And that idea of being able to write and write and write till you get to some sort of core inner notion, I always thought that was pretty awesome. And I also like the notion that they would type to music, right? That the rhythms of the typewriter's keys could almost be an instrument that would pull something out of you. And so I've been writing that way since high school. Not as much as I should or would like to, but certainly when lyrics are needed for songs or a song comes and maybe a chorus comes in and it needs to be verses or vice versa, I go to the typewriter and do the thing.
And what's been fun for you about being able to perform live after all these years?
You know, I suppose just the spontaneous back and forth that comes from sort of in the moment energies being put out there in the interaction back and forth in a live setting. I'm also a visual artist. I got an art degree at CU Boulder, and I sort of feel like I don't differentiate much between music and visual art. And so the creative process that's happening on stage in real time with For Your Best Friend, the happen chant, what everybody's bringing to the table emotionally at a given time will always have different results, and there's something fascinating about what comes of that. I also find that it's just awesome when it rips, you know? When everything's tight as and you've been either playing a lot or everyone happens to have been practicing a ton, and sort of the magic that comes from the tightness that can happen on stage and is exciting. The energy that the crowd can bring obviously is another variable that gets thrown in the mix of the alchemy that happens in a live situation, and that can add to the excitement as well.
Is there anything that you hope audience members will be able to take away from your shows when they come and see you?
You know, I hope they see that we love what we're doing, right? And can be inspired by that in some way. Also that, you know, I don't know if this is evident, but we're certainly not judging each other internally, kind of letting cats do their thing, especially in the Dragondeer context. And there'll be some of this as well at the Camera Room show, is that we kind of give each other spaces to shine, right? And I think that's just important in life, I suppose, to let the other guy shine and not have it all be about yourself. And I would hope that that's inspirational too. And really just in the Dragondeer context, I think coming from indie rock, where yes, there's some dancing to a degree and playing sort of the indie clubs around Denver, and then all of a sudden being injected into like the Cervantes scene and seeing how much people danced to what we were doing was sort of eye-opening to us, because I think coming from indie rock, we weren't used to that, as much movement in the crowd, and that was exciting to us to see people really being able to cut loose and get down. I know if the music is of that ilk, I like doing that myself, so to see the crowd doing that, I think really inspired us to have an emphasis on stretching songs, and we do that live where there's definitely parts of songs that are malleable to expand, and if we see people getting down, it could double, triple the length of the song, where we're just like, awesome, people are getting down, like let's let them do that, because who doesn't like to do that? It's cathartic. So yeah, if people want to cut loose, get themselves, that would be awesome at our shows.
So what appealed to you about being able to open for Tom Hamilton Jr.?
Right, so I think a lot of times bands will request a more stripped down thing for like stage room, right? To have two bands, it's sort of a quicker turnaround and to give their fans sort of a different flavor than what they're doing. Obviously there's a gazillion double band, triple band, quadruple band bills, but I think there is something nice of a ramp up to have something stripped back and then have the evening's energy kick in. So I kind of understood why that was being asked of us. And in the last like 3 years, we've been doing more acoustic gigs, and there's something intimate, and it's just a different vibe, and it's a vibe I like. I think the words come through. I think some of the just duo back and forth energy, you really focus on it because there's not the cacophony of drums and bass. I wouldn't say I like it better, but I do like that it's a different flavor. And then in regards to Tom Hamilton, I mean, I've seen him in a couple different incarnations. I've definitely seen him in J-Rad maybe 3 times, and then I want to say I saw him with Billy and the Kids at Red Rocks, where he played with Billy Strings too, right? And so, I mean, what a G, what a ripper he is. Yeah, he's just a shredder. So it was kind of a no-brainer. He's just super talented on guitar and a talented singer, and I saw him do a Shine On You Crazy Diamond at Red Rocks with J-Rad that was like a genuine mind blower. So yeah, we definitely jumped at the chance to be on stage with him.
I'm not going to tell you what J-Rad stands for right now. That'll come later on in the episode. But we will come back to talking about J-Rad and Billy and the Kids a little bit later on. But before we do that and move on to our next guest, is there anything, Eric, that you want to sign off with?
Yeah, we put records out on Color Red. It's a label here out of Denver. It is bengalied by Eddie Roberts from the New Master Sounds, and Eddie records and produces our music as well. And we have a new single coming out September 13th. I don't know when this article's coming out, but yeah, just tune into our Spotify. Music's out there, or whatever digital thing you do.
Thank you so much to Eric for coming on board and joining us for the podcast. And a special shout out to Cole for also being involved in opening for this upcoming show. I'll talk more details about the show as a whole once we get through our next guest. But before we do that, I do want to promote more stuff involving Eric, Cole, and Dragondeer. You can check out various releases from Dragondeer over the years wherever you get your music, and you can check out the band and learn more about them at dragondeer.com. Dragondeer are also on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, so be sure to check all of those pages out to hear them perform and learn more about what they're doing next. Oh, and if you're curious about the other projects that Eric mentioned that he and Cole were involved in, you can check them out online as well. Eric's other project is on Instagram at Wabi Music. That is W-A-B-I Music. You can also follow Eric at Eric Halborg and Cole at Cole Rudy Music on Instagram. And be sure to check out the various other projects that Cole has been involved in over the years, including Varlet, V-A-R-L-E-T, Barnacle, and projects that Eric didn't mention, Elucidarius, E-L-U-C-I-D-A-R-I-U-S, and Wetlands. All the way back in 2010, Cole even announced that he was working on a solo album. I'm not sure if it was ever released. I personally can't find it anywhere. But let me know if you guys find it. Before we move on to our second and final guest of the week, some additional context. I wasn't planning on releasing this particular episode of the podcast or writing the column that goes along with it until about next week, actually. I was planning on promoting the show that's coming up just a smidge closer to when it's actually performing. However, in the end, I managed to interview both Eric and our next guest on the same day. Within hours of each other, they both basically said that they were available, so I was able to get an article together for this week, and now here's the podcast episode for it. And because of that, I was able to fit in another group of musicians for next week that I am equally excited to share with you guys. So in the end, I'm glad it worked out, and I am very glad that both of these musicians were willing to talk to me for this particular episode of the podcast, especially our next guest, whose career is immense. We went on a deep dive through all of his various projects, and I am very excited to bring that deep dive to you. I do also want to let you know a little bit ahead of time. This next interview contains a lot more censored swearing than usual. I think it's time to just jump right into it. Do you mind introducing yourself real quick?
Sure, man. My name's Tom Hamilton. I play guitar and sing and write songs, and yeah, I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a Capricorn. That sums it up.
Initially, the Capricorn tidbit seems like it could just be a random fun piece of information as an icebreaker. However, I am also a Capricorn, so I couldn't help but ask when his birthday was.
New Year's Eve.
I thought that was actually insane because I was born on December 30th. Sure, we're not even close to the same age, but it's cool that we share so close to the same birthday.
No way. I'm not going to tell you what time I was born, though, because I don't want a bunch of people doing my chart.
Because Tom mentions his age later in the interview, though, I'm going to mention his birth year a little bit later on in this particular interview. Not the exact time, though, of course. But I gotta say, Tom, I am very excited to interview you. And as we've been talking about, you're coming out to the Caribou Room to perform a massive show. Do you want to talk a little bit more more about that?
Sure, man, yeah. I'm coming out playing in Ned. I have a hot band that is, man, these guys are just killers and great players, great improvisers. And yeah, man, we're going to come and knock your socks off for 2 sets of a full concert in Netherlands. I've been doing this for a while, and so I have quite a back catalog of songs. And so, yeah, it's just going to be, it's a cool experience. You know, we improvise, there's big moments, there's tiny moments. We really try to make the shows have an arc to them, you know?
And we're about to go into a deep dive involving that massive catalog of songs. But before we do that, there's a connection that people might make to you and another musician that, even though it exists in theory, it is not a true connection. Do you know what I'm talking about?
In the name? Yeah. The bass player from Aerosmith. Oddly enough, not only do we have the same name, Tom Hamilton, but we're both juniors. He is also a junior, and we have the same birthday.
We're going to have one more mention of birthday coincidences, because there is one more birthday that is closer to those birthdays, and I find that coincidence absolutely insane. 2 New Year's Eve birthdays, my December 30th birthday, and we'll talk about 1 or 2 more further down in the interview. But I had to ask, really? You were born on the same day?
Yeah, we're both Tom Hamilton Jr., and we both were born on December 31st. Yeah, pretty cool.
I did end up doing some background research. Tom Hamilton, the bassist of Aerosmith, is actually not a junior from what I can tell. His father is named George. However, he was born on December 31st. He was born in 1951, while Tom Hamilton Jr. was born in 1978. Again, Tom will state his age later in the interview, but if you want to try and guess how old he is before he says it, you can try and do the math. All right, now let's get into your musical background, because just because you have no connection to Aerosmith whatsoever, that does not mean you don't have an incredibly storied music career of your own. I guess the first place that I want to start, Tom Hamilton Sr., was he a musician?
Yes. He was. My dad he started as a drummer, and then when I was a kid, he was a bass player, mostly. I mean, he dabbled in all sorts of shit, but he was a bass player. He had a band that was just kind of like a blues band, classic rock / blues band in Philly, and I grew up there was always a band practicing in my basement, and I just thought that's just what you did, you know? My dad was very encouraging about playing, but he never, pushed it. He always was just like, hey, if you're interested in this, we can talk about it, or you can explore it, but, if you're not, no pressure. But that was the example I grew up with, was that every weekend, either there was a rehearsal at the house or they had a gig or something around the city, and that's what we did. That was our role in society. You provide the soundtrack to people's weekends and to people having a good time and to people enjoying their lives. And so it was kind of always presented as, or I always kind of considered it as more of a vocation than anything else. You know, it was just yeah, this is just what you do. It was never about money or fame or any of that stuff. It was just being a part of your community and just playing tunes, get out there and play, you know?
So from what you're saying, music has always connected with you from a very early age. And from the time you really started performing, it didn't matter whether or not you became successful, what happened with the projects that you joined. You just wanted to play music and connect with an audience.
Yeah, I mean, I was a real shy kid. I mean, I've learned how to be more outgoing through my job. But, when I was a kid, I was very anxious and had a lot of social anxiety, was very shy. And music I saw as a way to connect and to communicate without necessarily having to do small talk or whatever it was that I was kind of nervous about with meeting people. And I would go see my dad play, and my older brother also played, and they were both very outgoing people that were great socially. And seeing what music did and how it brought people together, and it was an icebreaker, and it was a way to help me get out of my shell and to help me connect with other people. And yeah, I loved it for that. I started playing out in clubs and stuff when I was 12 with my older brother, and all through high school on the weekends, most kids are drinking in the woods, but I was playing at bars with my older brother, and it was cool. It was just the way things went.
We'll come back to Tom's older brother in a second, because he'll continue to be involved in Tom's musical career. Usually I ask this particular question closer to the end, but I decided to ask this question closer to the beginning this time around, because I felt it would add some context as to all of the various projects that we're about to talk about. It sounds like you enjoy performing with groups a lot more than you enjoy performing solo.
Oh, yeah, man, for sure. The thing that really grabbed me by the short and curlies when I was young was the improvising thing. In my late teens, I started my own band and with my friends and people that were closer to age. And we really took improvising seriously, of trying to find our own lane. And I guess it gave me ambition of like, wow, what is possible? What's possible when you're having that conversation with people? What's possible when you can really surrender to the moment and to willingly be a cog in a machine where you have 4 or 5 people that are improvising as one voice as opposed to maybe like people taking separate solos or whatever, It was the group think thing that I really, really loved. When that was something that clicked for me and made sense. You don't get that on your own. It's the conversation, which is the thing that really got me going and still does. You could be a great player and that's awesome, but I want to improvise. I want to have a conversation. there's mischief in it. When there's a green light to chase any moment into whatever everybody collectively feels, man, that's awesome. It could be terrible, but it could also be really great. It's the thing that's closest to magic that exists. When that stuff's all firing at the same time and growing in the same direction, and I'm still kind of just chasing that high. I love it. I love taking song and trying to create a unique experience every time the song is played. And that's as much for me as it is for an audience,
Okay, and now into the bands that actually have a catalog that you can check out. I honestly did not tell Tom at the time of the interview that the list I was reading was from his Wikipedia page because I figured it would give me a basic background and then let Tom tell the actual story if it ended up being incorrect. But based on that list, the first major venture that you ended up starting was straight out of high school with the band that you ended up calling Brothers Past.
Yeah, that was just like a high school. It started out as just a high school band. We were all like 17 or 16 or whatever. Yeah, 17. And we were just kind of playing Dead covers and Allman Brothers covers and shit like that. And then we kind of discovered Fish, and that lit a real creative fire under our asses. And we're like, okay, let's really be a band, because Fish seemed so ambitious to us. It was like, wow, this is really some out there shit. And that kind of gave me and my bud a creative green light to be like, yeah, man, it. Let's just try to find our own lane and really be an original band and write music and all that stuff. And so by like 98, 99 is when Brothers Past really became an actual band of artists. When we were like, okay, we're going to stop. We all agreed to stop listening to any jam bands. Like, all right, no longer listen to the Dead or Fish or the Allmans. It was like, all right, let's find new information and try to find our own lane. And Brothers Past was great, man. We were really active from like, I'd say 99 to, I don't know, 06 or 07. And it was great. We had a good run. We were original. We definitely had our own thing and our own lane. And it was cool because we leaned pretty heavily into like indie rock and electronic music. And as a guitar player, there's not a lot of guitar solos in electronic music, you know, or in indie rock for that matter. And it was really cool, and I'm grateful for that because I had to redefine what a guitar player was in my mind. Where it was like, all right, man, like it's not about blistering solos necessarily. It's more about creating layers and that whole being a part of bigger thing, you know. And yeah, so Brothers Past is great, man. I love that band. I love those songs. And actually, in the band I'm bringing out on tour right now, the keyboard player is Tom McKee from Brothers Past. This is our first tour together in probably 15 years, something like that.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent for a second, but I promise it's going to connect back to Tom's musical career and something that I find interesting about all this. On September 5th, the day that I actually conducted both the interview with Eric and with Tom, I got an email in my inbox from the Ed Sheeran newsletter that talked about a new EP that he had just released called My Forgotten Favorites. It was a collection of 6 songs that he had released over the years back when he was a smaller artist, just to put in perspective where he started and how far he's come. One of these songs was Little Bird, which he also ended up filming a short cover for and posting on Instagram. And he talked in that email, which included the announcement paragraph for My Forgotten Favorites, about how Little Bird was still a very special song to him, and how he was now performing a song that he wrote at 17 years old, 16 years later, in a field in Suffolk. Much like he wrote the song in a field in Suffolk. And so I started thinking. In the previous episode of the podcast, I talked with Chaz Chambers and Yami Cabrera about a presentation that they're hosting at the Netherland Community Library. More details in that episode. Please listen to it. It's a really good one. In that interview, Chaz mentions that he had caught on one of my social media pages that I was a musician myself. And I forgot to mention that particular aspect of it when editing, but it is absolutely true. Since COVID, I have really focused on writing my own songs. And the first big song that I really wrote during that time, which is called Call It a Day, was the first song that I really remember being proud of, and the first song that made me realize I could pursue songwriting like that. Connecting this back to Ed Sheeran and realizing that he now has a song that is over 15 years old that is such a huge part of how he started, I couldn't help but think about how I'll feel about my song Call It a Day when it turns 15, and how I'll still be proud of that song in probably a different way than I am right now. And before I started editing this podcast, I realized, in a lot of ways, Brothers Past is really that venue for Tom. It was the first time that he was able to express himself through his writing, through a specific project. And almost 30 years later, I can't help but feel he probably looks back at those songs with a different pride than he may have looked at them back then. He mentioned he was still proud of those songs, of course, but I find it fascinating that Ed Sheeran in his early 30s has that little kernel of the beginning of his songwriting career still a part of him. And Tom Hamilton probably has that same kernel in a much different way. And I find that fascinating. I wish I had come up with asking him about that specific question during the actual interview. But, of course, by the time I thought about it, it was way too late. Anyway, enough of that tangent, back to the interview. I said immediately after that I thought it was really cool that those two band members from Brothers Past were able to reconnect after all this time.
It is, man. It's cool for us to have reconnected in that manner, and we're playing some of those old tunes. They're in the rotation, which is really fun, and yeah, it's cool. So we did that for a while, and then that band kind of ran its course. Our drummer decided he wanted to go to law school. The last two, real gigs we played with Brothers Past were the main stage at Bonnaroo and opening for Dave Matthews. And then our drummer quit. We're just like, dude, what the are you doing, man? We're finally breaking through. But hey, it all is what it is. And then I guess then after that was American Babies, which was a band I started with Joe Russo from J-Rad that I still play with, and my older brother, Jim, on bass.
I told you we would get back to Tom's older brother at some point. I thought it was cool that Tom started out his primary performances with Jim in various bars when he was around 11 or 12. And then he ended up joining Brothers Past. Tom tried to tell me that he was only in the band for a little while, and I spoke over him, so I didn't initially hear what he told me. However, I later looked back at the information that I had found about Brothers Past and realized that Jim, along with two other members of the band, actually decided to leave in 1999 to pursue their own life goals. So ultimately, the reason why that was around the time that the band started truly flourishing is because that was when the lineup truly cemented. But clearly, this wasn't the last time that he would perform with Jim, because he ended up being a part of American Babies. And I just find it really cool that there's such a great musical connection between Tom and his brother. I don't know where the name Brothers Past came from, but I can't help but wonder if that somehow involved the connection between Tom and Jim. And I just mentioned that I thought that connection was really cool.
Yeah, playing with my brother is the greatest. We definitely share a brain, and we have a telepathy that you could really only have with somebody you've been playing music with since you were 11, So yeah, it is. It's great. And our harmonizing was always awesome. Family, same voice, so we blended really well. But he was also in the Army Reserve, so we started American Babies, and the band, the touring band, was me and Joe Russo on drums, and my brother on bass, and Scott Metzger from J-Rad as well on the other guitar. And then my brother got sent to Afghanistan, and Joe got poached by Bob Weir and Phil Lesh of the Grateful Dead. They started this band called Further, and they hired Joe to be the drummer. So I basically lost my rhythm section to American Babies. You can't argue with either of those reasons, it's whatever, it is what it is. So yeah, so I kind of just did the rotating cast under the American Babies moniker for a while, and it was just basically a solo act that I just kept using the name to tour under. And yeah, and then J-Rad started. That was a whole thing.
I know. I've been building up up a lot to J-Rad over the course of this episode, and I promise we're going to get there soon. But there's a question that I wanted to ask Tom for additional context before we continued on with this deep dive. Was there a band before Brothers Past that you played in? Maybe a band that you formed with middle school friends or high school friends? Or was Brothers Past really the first band where you all decided to just go for it?
Yeah, that was the first one where it was like, okay, we're going to get in a van and go on the road. When I was like 11 or 12, I started playing out in bars around Philly with my brother, and it was just a cover band. We weren't writing original music, and it was definitely just learning the ropes, you know? I mean, I was a kid. I didn't really understand what was going on, and my brother's only 4.5 years older, so it's not like he was much smarter about it than I was. But it was a good way to cut my teeth just playing around Philly and the suburbs of Philly and, you know, just learning the grind, and I don't know, it gave me good perspective of doing that thing.
Okay. Now let's get back into the deep dive. There's just one more group to talk about before J-Rad, and that group is Electron, which I'm reading has actually been playing since 2000. But I'm wondering, how major is that group in regards to your performances?
Yeah, that was just kind of like a side thing. So Electron is two of the guys from the Disco Biscuits. I don't know if you know that band, but they're also Philly guys, and they're in the jam world. They're like pretty heavy electronic music, and we're all in Philly together. I've been friends with those guys since probably, like 98, I think. So we're all just really good buds, and Electron is just kind of like a way for us to get together and play, you know, just like a few times a year. I think the most we ever played in one year was like 4 shows. It's not a thing of, hey, we're like going for anything. It's just like, hey man, it's 4 buds that like to hang out, you know? So it's the bass player and keyboard player from the Disco Biscuits, which is Mark and Aaron, respectively, and the drummer from a band called Lotus. They're also based in Philadelphia. And myself. And it's just a fun time. We play, a lot of it is Mark and Aaron's material from the Disco Biscuits with some of my songs sprinkled in as well. And yeah, it's just super fun, man. It's the epitome of just having a good time. No reason to take it too seriously. Like, we're just 4 guys that love being together and hanging out. We don't get to do it in regular social ways, so we book shows, you know?
I want to shout out the full names of all of the members that Tom just mentioned. There's Aaron Magner, who is the keyboardist from the Disco Biscuits. There's Mark Brownie Brownstein, who plays bass guitar and vocals in Disco Biscuits. And then the drummer from Lotus is named Mike Greenfield. Another very random connection here. There is another Mike Greenfield who runs the YouTube channel Brothers Green, which is a cooking duo with his brother Josh. This is not the same Mike. In the end, though, I think it's really cool that a group like this can come out of these 4 people's passion for music, and that ultimately all they care about with this group is just having fun with their friends. All right, now we come to J-Rad. For those who don't know, what does J-Rad stand for? Joe Russo's Almost Dead. That's right, Joe Russo, who at this point has been touring with members of the Grateful Dead in Further, is the titular member of this band. How did this band happen, and how did he come back to form a band with his name in it?
It was by accident, man. There was this event at a venue in Brooklyn, New York called the Brooklyn Bowl, and there was this big event they were having, like a big multi-band bill, and the headlining band, I can't remember who it was, but the headlining band had a pull-out at the relative last minute, and they approached Joe about, hey, do you want to throw something together and take this headlining slot at this event? And he and I had jokingly talked about, I mean, because I grew up playing Dead covers. Like we're just saying, playing Dead covers in bars from the time I was 12 until I was like 18, you know? And Joe wasn't very much into the Grateful Dead before he got this gig with Bob and Phil. So we were able to connect more over him discovering how great the catalog was and stuff like that. And so we always joked about, you know, hey, we should do a show of Dead tunes without Joe's bosses, without Bob or Phil, just as like a lark, you know? It was just something fun to do. So this opportunity came up, and Joe reached out to me and the other guys, and was like, hey, do you guys want to do this? It was just a one-time thing, no pressure. It really didn't matter. And we played the one show, and people really responded to it. The recordings of the show went viral, and they're just turned into this really large demand for this thing. But the problem was none of us wanted to be in a Grateful Dead cover band or any cover band. We all played original music. I had American Babies. Marco has his own trio. Scott does all sorts of great stuff around New York. And Dave Drywitz is in Ween as the bass player in Ween. So we all kind of had our own shit going on. And then after about a year of getting all these offers and people kept asking us to play, we finally kind of relented, and we were like, all right, let's do one more show and I guess just see if anybody actually gives a shit. and we did it at a pretty big room in New York called the Capitol Theater, and it sold out. We sold 2,000 tickets to this thing, and we all kind of looked at each other like, oh, okay, I guess we should discuss doing this more often. It seems like, because we're all playing original music, and we're like lugging it out in clubs, and we all still are. We play original music. We all still have our own bands, and yeah, we play in clubs and theaters still, playing original music. But with J-Rad, we're playing these big-ass rooms. So yeah, we kind of like talked it over, and we're like, you know what? The demand is there. People really love this stuff, and there's a bit of having the torch involved in it too, of trying to make sure that catalog kept reaching younger people and kept growing. The whole thing with J-Rad is very much not trying to sound like the Grateful Dead, and it's that mischievous thing I was talking about earlier of seeing what things can do and taking chances every night and trying to let those songs continue to grow and be living documents, you know? So yeah, man, so we all kind of agreed that we would keep doing it, and we wouldn't play that much. We only do 30 or 40 shows a year, but it's been good to us. We've gotten to do some great things, and we've met some great people, and I think we've had a real impact on how that catalog of music is played, and we're all just very thankful that people give a shit.
For additional context here, the lineup of Joe Russo's Almost Dead, or J-Rad, was actually put together fairly easily in regards to recruiting all of the members. Joe Russo did contact Tom Hamilton to join the band, but the other members all came from a previous band that he was in called Bustle in Your Hedgerow. The members of this group are Joe Russo, of course, Scott Metzger, Marco Benevento, and Dave Drywitz. As Tom has already mentioned, Dave Drywitz is in fact the bass player for Ween. Based on the information that I found, Dave and keyboardist Glenn McClelland joined Ween in April 1997, and 2 months later, the band's most iconic album, The Mollusk, was released. Both members are ultimately credited on the album, although I'm not sure what they contributed on the album as a whole. Either way, though, if you've heard of the band Ween at all, you've heard of them for this album, which was actually a direct influence on creator Steven Hillenburg for the iconic animated television series SpongeBob SquarePants. In fact, Hillenburg repaid the favor for the album directly influencing the show by putting Ocean Man as the credit song in the original SpongeBob SquarePants movie in 2004. The song has since made a resurgence online as an internet meme, but if you grew up in the early 2000s, that's likely where you've heard that song. In the end, it turns out Joe Russo's involvement with Dave from Ween isn't exactly out of left field. That group that had to pull out last second, that was actually the Dean Ween Group, which is the side project of Mickey Melchiondo, Dean Ween himself. Joe was actually supposed to play in the Dean Ween Group that night, but when the group pulled out, Joe had to pull together something else, and that's ultimately how J-Rad came together. Even despite knowing this, it absolutely blew my mind that Tom was directly involved with one of the current members of Ween. But what was also fascinating to me about Dave as a person is that he was born on January 2nd. So, again, to recap, Tom Hamilton and Tom Hamilton Jr. were both born on December 31st. I was born on December 30th, and Dave Drywitz was born on January 2nd. What the heck is with all these birthdays being so close to each other?
Yeah, I mean, Joe's birthday is December 18th. He's not that far away from me either.
Either way, I had to mention again that I thought it was awesome that Tom was directly involved with Dave from Ween, because at this point, I think Ween is legendary.
Oh, what a great band.
But back to the latest big project of your career as a whole, Tom. The project that I am seeing as the latest project that you have delved into is the band Ghostlight.
Yeah, I was doing the American Babies thing still when J-Rad happened, and J-Rad kind of put things into a different face, and I just felt like the name American Babies served me enough at the time, and I wanted to just kind of, with American Babies, every album, I basically would just put together a whole new band and then tour the album. And then after, 18 months or so of touring the record, I would just retreat back into the studio and make a new album and then lather, rinse, repeat. So I finished an album cycle with American Babies Babies. I made this record that I really am proud of called An Epic Battle Between Light and Dark. It's a really cool, moody, insane sounding album. And it kind of got to the point where it was like, okay, it's time to do it again. Get a new band and start writing new material. And, I had met a woman named Raina Mullen, who's just an incredible singer, and I had hired her to be in the band for American Babies. So when it came time to start thinking of a new record and stuff, I really wanted to write with her, and I wanted to see what our collaborative nature would be, what it would sound like. And I was like, you know what, man, let's just kind of do a full rebrand, basically. So we put together a band. We approached a drummer, Scott Zwang. He was in a band called Dopapod, but he didn't have a gig, and so we asked him if he wanted to be in it. There was this woman, Holly Bowling, who's an incredibly talented piano player, but all she does is play Fish covers. And it was like, man, I would love to see what you would do with original music. And she really had an appetite for that as well. But composition wasn't necessarily like a strong suit of hers at the time. So it was like, hey, come be a part of this thing. And a bass player named Steve Lyon, who is just an incredible producer, incredible bass player, just a wonderful musical mind. And we kind of put the band together and we were like, listen, trust us. Rain and I are going to write an album's worth of music and it's going to be good. We promise. But will you guys be in a band with us? And they all said yes. So Rain and I just retreated to a studio and took a shitload of acid and wrote a bunch of songs, and then that was the band. And the idea kind of going into it was to make 2 records and then take a break. So that's almost exactly what we did. We made 2 very good albums that I'm so proud of, and then it was just the band kind of just ran its course. We've all just kind of went our separate ways and pursued different things, and yeah, I mean, that's kind of just how bands go.
Even though it seems unfortunate that this band didn't make that many records, it sounds like you guys ultimately followed through with the plan that you established, and that everyone is able to continue doing things that they really enjoy, and that they've found something that they really love doing now.
Yeah, it's great. And Raina's in a band called the Happy Fits now, and it's more poppy than indie, but whatever, man. Anything Raina touches is going to be great. She's a really talented woman, and everybody's just kind of got their own thing going, and it's nice. And who knows, maybe one day we'll do another Ghostlight record or a Ghostlight tour, but for now, we're all doing our own shit. And I started working on a record. As soon as Ghostlight kind of was like, all right, we're all going to go our own ways, I just started writing. Yeah.
Tom just mentioned a solo record. We'll get back to that in a second. Before we get into that, though, you have had quite the storied career when it comes to the bands that you have formed. But you have also been involved in some very exciting projects as well. Joe Russo is not the only person that has ended up getting involved with members of the Grateful Dead. How crazy is it, with you having started early on performing Grateful Dead covers, and with you now in a Grateful Dead tribute band, that you ended up touring quite a few years ago with Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead?
Yeah, Phil, and yeah, I mean, dude, it's been so cool, man. I'm so grateful, and no pun intended. Yeah, it's incredible, man. I got to play with Phil Kreutzer, the drummer. I was in his band called Billy and the Kids. I played a shit ton with Bob. Yeah, man, it's a real charmed existence, man. I can't really put it into words how thankful and lucky I am to have the relationships I have with those guys, and to have their blessing that they think that what we're doing does have value and does mean something to the catalog. Yeah, it's not something I had on my career bingo card, and I would have never, ever guessed that that's something that would have actually come to fruition. If you asked me when I was 16, if I ever thought I was going to play with any of those guys, I'm like, no way, they would even talk to me, But yeah, it's just so lucky, man, and cool, yeah.
So, again, just as a mention, first, Tom ended up touring with Phil Lesh briefly as part of his group Phil and Friends. Then he ended up joining Bill Kreutzmann's band, Billy and the Kids, along later with Bob Weir and Mickey Hart. So that's 4 members of the Grateful Dead that Tom has been able to tour with over the years. And in 2022, he also played with Melvin Seals, Dave Schools, Duane Trucks, Jacqueline LaBranche, Lady Chi, and the Colorado Symphony Orchestra at the Jerry Garcia 80th Birthday Symphonic Celebration held at Red Rocks. That must have been an absolutely incredible experience for him. Ultimately, there was no way that Tom and Jerry's paths would ever have crossed. Jerry died in 1995, and Tom formed Brothers Past around 1996. But to be directly involved in some way with honoring Jerry's legacy must be incredibly awesome for him. But there's one more aspect of your solo career that I haven't talked about yet, and that is that you have occasionally served as producer behind the scenes, not just writer and performer of your own material.
Yeah, man. I mean, mostly, honestly, I don't really do it for other bands very much. I mostly just, like, all the records that I make, I produce. The last 3 American Babies records I produced myself, and the 2 Ghostlight albums. And yeah, I have a studio in Philly that's pretty kick-ass. And yeah, man, I just like making shit. It's just the creation aspect of it. Whether it's making records and that long, deliberate process of creating something with intention. And then there's the live thing, which is it's creation on the spot. It's immediate gratification. And, you know, like I was saying earlier, that being able to just create something out of nothing. And yeah, it's just, I've always been an artist. I just like making shit, you know?
I didn't end up asking clarifying questions about these particular moments in his musical career during the interview, but I did just want to mention these because I think they're really cool details. Not only has Tom produced for a bunch of his own projects, but in 2002, he also produced an early project for then unknown Philadelphia artist Kurt Vile, who later joined the War on Drugs. Tom also worked directly with the Disco Biscuits to produce and record their 2010 release Planet Anthem, and he also worked with Mason Porter to record and produce their 2010 album Thunder in the Valley. So, those are the essential beats. Early starts in music with his family, 5 major bands that he has formed over the years, involvement in 2 groups and a memorial performance for members of the Grateful Dead, and producer of many of his own albums, as well as 3 additional releases. I ended up doing some quick math in my head and mentioned to Tom that career, starting from when he performed with his brother when he was 11 or 12, and going up until now, has lasted 30 to 35 years.
Oh, that's so f***ed up.
Over all of that time, how have all of these different projects allowed you to consistently experiment and try new things in the creative process?
You know, they're all different tools. Well, first of all, the thing that keeps it going is like I said, man, it's just what I do. I just like making stuff. There's always room. There's always something else. There's always, if you have the will to put yourself through the ringer to create something, I don't think you ever stop doing it. You don't stop growing and learning. I mean, there's always new things happening and life is happening. Man, you know, I'm 45 years old. There's all sorts of shit that's always going on. My dad just passed away last month. That's pretty fucking heavy. I need to deal with that. And how I deal with life is through art. It's through creation. And that's how I express myself, you know? Over the years, I lived in a car for the better part of 3 years. I've been in love. I've been devastated by it. I felt the greatest highs in the world by it. Life is life, man, and that's just how I process it. I have to do it. It's not like and I don't mean it in a negative way, it's not necessarily a want. It's a need. It's a need thing. I have to do this. I have to be on the road. That's a thing that fills a void in me. I don't know what that void stems from, but there's something there. And being on the road and meeting people and traveling, and that experience fills my cup. And being in a studio and creating and writing songs and reinventing myself and finding new ways to express myself also fills a void. It's just how I process the world.
And over all that time of performing live with so many different people, what has been your favorite part of it all?
That's a good question, man. Just the joy. I just love it. I love it. My dad was sick for the last few years, and I didn't go on the road as much over the last couple of years. I'd be around a little more. And we would schedule jam sessions with him and my brother and myself. And we would just play in a room. Maybe just like a couple people there. And he was awesome. We connected and had so much fun. It was so fun. And it's just as fun as playing Newport Jazz Fest with Branford Marsalis, you know, or playing with Bob and Bill and Mickey from the Dead, or they all are so unique and they're just such, who the would have thought that any of it would have ever happened? And I love all of it. I love all of it. Every time you get out there and you pick up the guitar, there's something joyous happening. That's the thread, you know?
And is there anything that you hope audience members will be able to take away from your shows when they come and see you perform?
That it felt like something they hadn't necessarily experienced before. I want to give people a unique experience that if you weren't there, there's no way that you could explain it. You're just, no, man, it was just what it was. You know, like that night was that night. I think it's cool. I don't know. I just love playing and the sense of adventure. And I just, I don't know. I hope people get moved. That's the goal. I just hope that whatever I'm throwing out into the universe, that the art can help somebody else in the way that art has helped me my entire life. it's paying it back, man. I don't just want to like take and take and take from music and art. I want to give back. And I hope there's some person in Duluth that's going through a breakup that listens to one of my tunes and decides that that day is a little bit better because of that. Or somebody that just had a baby and they listen to one of my tunes that makes them feel joy, and or whatever it is. Just to help and to be a part of other people's lives in the way that music's been a part of mine, you know?
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, I am a musician, but I end up writing my own songs and then not performing very much. I have performed as an opener for NetFest. I did that last year, and that was really fun. And as a little bit of a secret, I've got a bit of an announcement involving another shorter performance that I've got coming up in a little bit. But otherwise, the biggest amount of performances I've really had as a musician is uploading all of my stuff to social media. So it blew my mind earlier in the interview when Tom said that J-Rad alone performs 30 to 40 times a year. How many times do you perform a year?
Oh, man, you know, the sweet spot's like 100 shows. It's like a real nice, reasonable life. I don't mind it, though, when it goes over. You know, like 110, 115 is usually a real solid year, you know?
And now we transition to your music career now. I found an interview that you did back in March with a website called Jam Bands, where you mentioned that this tour that you're going on with the band that you have formed is a big musical journey. You're focusing on that solo band. You're going on tours with that band and focusing on your own music catalog and your own voice as Tom Hamilton Jr. And it's really exciting that the Caribou Room is a part of that journey. Do you want to talk about that transition into this particular musical journey?
Sure, yeah. You know, well, it's like I've been in all these bands, and because I like being in bands. Like I said, I like the camaraderie and the energy and whatever. But also, I do have to, I mean, at this point in my life, it's like, why not just go out under my own name? It's fine. People know who it is at this point. It just seems like the easiest thing of just be me and whatever. So yeah, I've been making a record. I started writing this thing last year. You know, I have a writing partner, and yeah, we started kicking ideas around in early of 23 and kind of took a year of just writing a fuckload of tunes, and this year started recording, picked whatever it is, 10 or 12 songs, and started recording them, and I put this band together of dudes that great guys I love hanging out with, and that are great players, and yeah, you know, these guys helped me work out these songs, and we recorded a lot of it together, and then it was like, okay, well, this record's going to come out probably like spring of next year, but a band needs to become a band, so I wanted to just start getting out there and start kind of getting our feet under us as a group. So we did a short little run of shows on the East Coast. We're doing this quick little weekend in Colorado coming up at the end of September. And then we're going to go out west and do a nice little jaunt right down the West Coast. And like I said, just to kind of gel and bond as a band and as musicians. So next year when the record comes out, we can hit the ground running. And I said earlier, you know, I certainly have a lot of anxiety, social anxiety. It's just something mental health things I've always dealt with. And for me, and I think in general, I think if you're a band and a band that improvises, I think the key to that is your relationships with each other in the band. And if you guys are all, if you know each other and you have open dialogue and there's a real connection there on a personal, interpersonal level, it's only going to help the music. So I didn't want to be figuring that out while I was on tour supporting an album. So I was like, all right, let's start doing it now and start getting our identity together as a group here. Do that, you know, I think this is the best band I've put together yet in my life that plays original music. It's a really interesting group of dudes, and yeah, the shows are just, if you like good songwriting and just absolutely bananas improvising, then I think you should come see us.
Now, you've been talking about the record that you've been working on. In fact, while I was interviewing Tom, he was actually in the studio working on that record. He stopped briefly so that we could do the interview, and then after we were done, he went right back to working on it. But based on what you've been talking about over the course of this deep dive into your musical career, this is the first time you've worked on your own solo record.
Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Well, you know, man, there's a bit of baggage that comes with the guitar player thing, of just like a bit of a stereotype there, of this egotistical look at me thing. And I never really, I don't want to play into that. And so my whole career, I've always just had a band name. I mean, American Babies, that wasn't a band, that was me. But, you know, I didn't want it to come off like that. Yeah, so I don't know. Now I just accept it. It's like, you know what, dude? It is what it is. My name's my name. I might as well just use it. Yeah, and just do the thing. Because like I said, man, I just like to play. I just like being out there, and I don't want to do it in fits and starts anymore. I don't want to like put together another band and then have to like rebrand and blah, blah, blah. It's like, nah, I'm just going to go out under my own name, and I'm in middle age, and I have hopefully many, many years ahead of me, and I just want to be out there, man. I just want to be out there playing.
Okay, now let's get into some clarifications about the Caribou Room show specifically. You are performing a major set with your solo band, but of course, Cole and Eric from Dragondeer are still involved in this show.
Yeah, they're opening for us.
So how did it come about that Eric and Cole ended up opening for you, Tom?
That was just the venue. We were like, hey, man, if there's anybody local, we'd love to have somebody else on the bill with us. And they sent us their music. We're like, yeah, cool. These guys are great. We'd love to have them.
I ended up phrasing this question a little awkwardly at first. I asked if there had been really any preparation done in regards to rehearsals for the band. And the way that I meant to phrase that question in the end was there any preparation involving both Tom and the solo band and Eric and Cole of Dragondeer? Was there any collaboration between the opening act and the main act, or have you both been practicing on your own and you're just going to see each other on the night?
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't talked with the opening band what they're doing at all. As far as my band and us, yeah, we have rehearsals and we're doing our homework and stuff. But yeah, I don't really know what the Dragondeer guys are up to, but I'm stoked to see what they do.
Well, we've done a huge deep dive into your musical career over the past 3 decades. We've talked about your bands, your upcoming solo projects, your other ventures with Grateful Dead members and Grateful Dead involved performances and production behind the scenes. We've talked about basically everything that I wanted to talk about. So is there anything else you wanted to mention before we signed off?
No, man, feels pretty good to me. I really appreciate you reaching out and having the interest to talk and help promote the show, man. Just thank you.
And thank you, Tom, for taking the time to come on board and join us for this podcast. I was really excited to do this deep dive into the massive catalog that you have built over the years, and I am so happy that we managed to make this interview work. If you want to learn more about Tom Hamilton and his sprawling musical career, then be sure to check him out on Twitter at Tommy Hamilton, on Instagram at TRH Jr., on Facebook as Tom Hamilton, and at his website at tomhamiltonjr.com, where you can check out his incredibly sprawling, decades-long catalog. In fact, by going to tomhamiltonjr.com and clicking on the music section, you can browse Spotify links for all of the bands that we talked about in this episode of the podcast, except for Electron. Those bands being Brothers Past, American Babies, Joe Russo's Almost Dead, and Ghostlight. You can also check out other work that he's done for projects that we didn't even mention in this episode of the podcast. The album Ooza Zoos by Moore, stylized in all caps and with an exclamation mark at the end, and the Younger Brother album Vaccine. And finally, if you want to see Cole Rudy and Eric Halborg open an acoustic duo set for Tom Hamilton Jr. and his epic solo band coming to Netherlands very, very soon, then you can check them out at the Caribou Room, 55 Indian Peaks Drive on Friday, September 27th, 2024. Doors open and dinner starts at 7 p.m. and the show starts at 8 p.m. Before we sign off completely for the week, there's one more thing we have to do. And now, for this week's music mentions. Head to Busey Brews, located 70 East 1st Street in Netherlands on Sunday, September 22nd, starting at 2 p.m. to see the Piney Tops duo performing live. Head to the Gold Hill Inn, located at 41 Main Street in Gold Hill on Friday, September 20th, starting at 8 p.m. to see the No Go Guildbillies performing live. On Saturday, September 21st at 7 p.m. to see the Natalie Spears Trio performing live. And on Sunday, September 22nd at 6:30 p.m. to see Fly in the Ointment performing live. Head to the Gold Hill General Store, located at 531 Main Street in Gold Hill on Friday, September 20th, starting at 7 p.m. to see Charlie White performing live. Head to Howlin' Wind Brewing, located at 51A Main Street in Rollinsville on Saturday, September 21st at 4 p.m. to see Steepland String Band performing live, and on Sunday, September 22nd throughout the entire day for a tattoo pop-up event featuring Justin Rice. Head to the Jamestown Mercantile, located at 108 Main Street in Jamestown on Wednesday, September 18th, starting at 5 p.m. for an open mic night. On Wednesday, September 18th, starting at 6 p.m. to see Mike Clark and the Sugar Sounds Duo performing live. On Thursday, September 19th at 7 p.m. to see Johnny Blueheart performing live. On Friday, September 20th at 6 p.m. to see Intergalactic Peace Jelly performing live. And on Sunday, September 22nd at 7 p.m. to see Thomas Dow performing live. Head to JKQ Barbecue, located at 200 Gregory Street in Blackhawk on Friday, September 20th at 6 p.m. and on Saturday, September 21st at 5 p.m. to see Adam Paws performing live. Head to Knotted Root Brewing, located 250 North Caribou Street in Netherland on Saturday, September 21st at 5 p.m. to see Break Signals performing live. Also be sure to head there every Friday at 7 p.m. for a DJ night, every second Friday at 7:30 p.m. for a reggae DJ night, and every Sunday at 5 p.m. for Jazz Sundays. Head to the Old Gallery at Allens Park, located at 14863 Highway 7 in Allens Park, on Friday, September 20th at 6:30 p.m. for the final open mic of 2024. Head to the Caribou Room, located at 55 Indian Peaks Drive in Netherland on Saturday, September 21st for the White Trash Adult Prom event featuring Colony Funk. Doors open and dinner starts at 7 p.m. and the show starts at 8 p.m. And finally, pick your preference. If you want to head to Gilpin County, be sure to check out the Very Nice Brewing Company location at 180 Jankowski Drive in Blackhawk on Friday, September 20th at 6 p.m. to see David Tillman performing live, and on Saturday, September 21st at 5 p.m. to see Windy Pines performing live. If you would prefer to head to Netherland, then be sure to go to the Very Nice Brewing location at 20 East Lakeview Drive, number 112, on Friday, September 20th at 6 p.m. to see Angel Corsi performing live, and on Saturday, September 21st at 5 p.m. to see Chris Smith performing live. Did we miss you or your performance? Want to submit your music listing in the Peak to Peak area? Do you have updates to your business or to your performances? Please call 303-810-5409 or email info@themountaineer.com or media@themountaineer.com to be included in the next print edition or the next podcast of The Mountain Ear. Thank you so much for coming on board and joining us for this very special episode of the Mountaineer Podcast's Music of the Mountains. Be sure to come back on Monday for a local events spotlight. And in the meantime, if you want to share this episode of the podcast or any others, then be sure to head to the mtnearpodcast.buzzsprout.com or the mtnear.com/the-mountain-ear-podcast to share them around with whoever you see fit. And if you're part of the Peak to Peak in any way and you want to be interviewed or you want to share advertising or you want to be involved with the podcast in some way, then please email me at media@themountaineer.com and we will get something sorted for you. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you on Monday. The song that you are currently listening to is called The Healing, and this song features Dan Africano on bass, Holly Bowling on keyboards and backing vocals, Scotty Zwang on drums and backing vocals, Raina Mullen on guitar and vocals, and Tom Hamilton Jr. on guitar and vocals. These members are all performing this song as part of the second album, also called The Healing, of Tom Hamilton Jr.'s latest group venture, Ghostlight. Tom Hamilton Jr. has had a sprawling musical career over 3 decades, and when I asked him to send me a song for this particular podcast from that sprawling catalog, this is the song that he sent me. For more information about Tom Hamilton Jr. and the various projects he's been a part of or worked on over the years, be sure to check him out on Facebook at Tom Hamilton, on Instagram at TRH Jr., on Twitter at Tommy Hamilton, or on his website at TomHamiltonJr.com. And you can check out Tom Hamilton Jr. performing live with a brand new solo band after an opening act featuring Eric Halborg and Cole Rudy of Dragondeer at the Caribou Room, located at 55 Indian Peaks Drive in Nederland on Friday, September 27th, 2024.
Call me a breeze.
And that's it for our show. Subscribe online to get more access to more news, weekly updates to our community calendar, and a link to our YouTube channel by visiting themountaineer.com. Be sure to use the coupon code PODCAST when subscribing for a 10% discount, only available to our listeners. If you are in the local Peak to Peak area, be sure to pick up a print edition of The Mountaineer at a local business. I'm Dango Rose. Thank you for listening.